I'm sure you're all devastated, but
It is sad.
it's heart-wrenching, I know. Um, any questions? What is this receipt? Let me get this. Any questions before we get started? Did you have a question? You were asking something right at the...
I'm making a new one. I couldn't find it. Do you know me?
You know, it's not that I don't know you, but sometimes when I'm teaching, I get distracted and I can't think about a name in time. It's not that I don't know you. I'd have to sit and think about it, and it breaks my flow. So the name cards are very helpful. All right. Okay, very good, Mike. Thank you. Any actual questions? Okay. Sorry, that was mean. That was mean. Let's start with the poll question then. All right, so here's your question. This also one's a little bit tricky, so read it carefully. Adam owns Blackacre and Whiteacre. Adam sells Blackacre to Betsy, but reserves an easement that allows the owner of Whiteacre to cross over Blackacre. Betsy buys Whiteacre and then sells it to Carl. Carl can cross Blackacre. True or false? Okay, take some time. You're all going like this. That's perfect. All right. Where am I? Okay, you're next? All right, so let's take this one step at a time, right? It says Adam owns Blackacre and Whiteacre. Adam sells Blackacre to Betsy, but reserves an easement that allows the owner of Whiteacre to cross for Blackacre. Lesson, how would you characterize that easement?
That means easement in gross.
What's an easement in gross?
It's where owns the easement holder that does not rent with and is not attached to it.
Who benefits from this easement? Is it necessarily Adam? What does it say? What do you call that kind of easement where it says the owner of a piece of land? It's not gross. Doesn't it? Appertenant, exactly right. And why is it appertenant? Does it benefit Adam in particular? That's right. We have here an easement appertenant. The reason why is it benefits whoever happens to own Blackacre at the given moment. It's not fixed. If this said that allows Adam to cross, then Blessing would be right, it'd be an easement in gross. But it doesn't say that. This allows people to come and go in Blackacre, and whoever happens to live there at a given time can cross. Everyone okay with that? All right, so Lisa? If this is an easement appertenant, which is the dominant estate and which is the servient estate?
Blackacre is dominant and Whiteacre is servient.
Why do you say that?
Because he's retained the easement in Blackacre.
What does it mean to be a servient estate, Lisa? What does that mean? Okay. And which of these two pieces of land is providing the service? Up here. Look, right up here. Which of these two is providing the service?
It is. Black acre. The service is for their land on this white acre. So, white acre is crossing over black.
Which one is serving? Which one's providing the service? To use your words.
White acre.
Ah. Whiteacre? True?
I don't know, you confused me. I knew it at the beginning.
No, you were wrong.
For myself.
You were wrong at the beginning also. No, you got it wrong at the beginning also. Drew, which one's servient? No.
I said
He's
white acre
crossing
serving
Black
black
Acre
acre.
and going to
Which is crossing over? Crossing over Blackacre. My goodness, Blackacre is doing the serving. This is not hard. Oh my goodness, this is not hard at all. Oh, this is just a fluke. I was trying to help both of you get there, but the owner of Whiteacre crosses over Blackacre. Blackacre servient here. Okay, do I need to make a comment on Saturday? No? This one was not hard, right? Blackacre is doing the servient. Okay? The owner of Whiteacre crosses over Blackacre. That's the benefit being provided. Does everyone see that? See that, Drew? Lisa, you see that? Okay, good. All right, Angie. Just in time, right? Okay, so we now know that Whiteacre was a dominant estate and Blackacre is servient, right? Okay, so then it says Betsy buys Whiteacre and then sells Whiteacre to Carl. What happens, Angie, when Betsy buys Whiteacre? We'll get to Carl in a minute, but when Betsy buys Whiteacre, what happens there? Well, again, Whiteacre was dominant, Blackacre was servient. What happens when Betsy owns both? What happens when Betsy owns both Blackacre and Whiteacre? Can you have an easement against yourself? What do you think? That's right. What happens to the easement at that moment when Betsy owns both Blackacre and Whiteacre? It dissolves. That's right. This is the harder part of the question. Stuff about which was dominant serving, we did it last week. This is the hard part of the question, and she's exactly right. When Betsy buys Whiteacre, she owns both the dominant and the servient estate. When the same person owns the dominant and the servient estate, we have what's called merger. Right? Remember merger? They merge into each other. And as a result, the easement dissolves. So Melanie, when Betsy then sells Whiteacre to Carl, is there an easement retained?
No.
That's right. It's gone. It's gone. So Melanie, can Carl cross Blackacre?
That's not if the easement dissolves.
That's exactly right. Oh, that's not bad. Most of you got that right, I think. I know that's the hard part of multiple choice. Why you put false, right? That's why I don't like multiple choice. I'll come back to you in a second, but I want to explain this point, right? Once you have what's called merger, where Betsy owns both Whiteacre and Blackacre, the easement dissolves. So at the moment Betsy sells the land to Carl, there's no longer an easement on it that allows him to cross. Therefore, Carl's trespassing. Now, Andrew, you put false for a different reason. You want to tell me why, please?
In my mind, I was thinking you can't transfer the easement. I was thinking
Okay, but that's why the very first question I asked was whether there's an easement of gross or easement appertenant. Do you see why there's appertenant?
Yeah, I feel like I presented that, but when I was answering the question, I was thinking it was gross.
See, and if you do easement gross, you're right. Okay, that's why. I want you to pay attention to how I framed it. I called 4 or 5 different people to get there, but how I ask each question. Right? 1 second, Mike. When you have any question easement, the first question you have to ask yourselves: is this an easement in gross or an easement appertenant? If it's in gross, then Angie is 100% correct. You can't assign it, right? At common law, at least, right? You can't assign it. But here it's appertenant. And once you know you have an easement appertenant, you have to classify which is a dominant estate and which is a servient estate. This part shouldn't be hard. The servient estate is the estate that's serving. Here, Blackacre is being crossed, right? You're crossing over Blackacre. That makes Blackacre the servient tenement. The owner of Whiteacre, in this case, is benefiting because the owner of Whiteacre can cross over the land. Therefore, Whiteacre is the dominant estate, right? That's phase 2. Phase 3 is you say, wait a minute, the same person owns both the servient and the dominant estate. The easement dissolves. You can't trespass against yourself. You can't have an easement on your own land. And that's one way of an easement, right? You ask, how do you get rid of an easement? One way to get rid of it is you buy the dominant estate, right? If you have a land, if you own the servient estate and you want to get rid of your easement, you buy the dominant estate and it's gone. That's why Carl, poor Carl, thinks he got an easement, he got nothing. And there's not going to be a record to say that that easement dissolved. You're going to have to figure it out from the fact that the owner of the dominant and the owner of the tenant was the same person. I'm sorry, the owner of the dominant and servient was the same person. You have to figure that out your own. There's no record saying easement dissolved, right? That's not a thing that happens. Melanie, then Mike?
Mike can go first.
Mike,
I figured it out in my head. Never mind.
you want to share with us?
No.
I can't make
No,
you.
what I was saying is basically, it reminded me of the church case.
Yes.
But if it was done right.
Yes, this is how it's supposed to be done. And let me thank you for saying that. This was the right way to do it, right? Adam didn't just give Betsy an easement just floating around, right? Adam gave Betsy the easement as part of a transaction for land. And at common law, you had to do it this way. So usually on an exam, I'm going to say there was a sale of land and the easement was part of that transaction. But I can do it the other way. On exam, I can say he sold her an easement. And if we're in a common law jurisdiction, you have to go, no, that's the church case, Willard, Church of Christ. You can't do that. Melanie, and then Holly?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, Melanie?
My question is if the owner is not easily identifiable or if it's like a group or a corporation, that
What do you mean?
like that they could own a bunch of dominant or servient estates and their transactions, like if you don't know, like if you're a subsidiary or something, I don't.
Well, why would it matter? If you're the owner, you're the owner, whether it's one person or 5 people. It shouldn't matter. I'm not sure I understand your question.
I don't think I do either.
Okay. Appreciate the honesty.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no. Anyone can own a piece of land, right? I have A and B here, Adam and Betsy, but it could be, a tenancy in common, right? They can be 5 people own it together. You can do it any which way. The analysis is exactly the same. They would all have to sell it together. Indeed, the case we're going to study in a few minutes is when people running a corporation jointly try to acquire an easement, right? That's the theme of the first case for today. Okay. All right, everyone get this question? All right, and again, I think the very first point I want to make is you have to characterize the easement correctly. Because at common law, you could not transfer an easement at gross. This was Angie's point a minute ago, right? You cannot transfer an easement at gross at common law. But you can assign an easement appertenant. Now, just to be clear, the way you would assign easement appertenant is by selling Whiteacre or Blackacre. It attaches to the land, Or you might see in some places it goes with the land, right? Or it rides with the land. There's different ways of saying it, but it's attached to the land. Yes, Alexis?
So if you write on a question, you say that the easement is assigned, should we assume that there was a land?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Unless I tell you the transaction, you can't assume that. Indeed, I've asked before in the past in a common law jurisdiction, A sells B an easement, and the answer is that's not valid because there's no land transaction associated with it. Right, so when I say an easement appertenant can be assigned, what that means is when you sell Blackacre to someone else, the easement sticks with the land, right? It's not bound to a specific person. Whoever lives on it then happens to either benefit from it or burdens by it. Easements were designed to last for a very long time. People didn't live very long back then, right? They lived, 40, 50 years, whatever, right? Easement would extend far beyond their lives. And usually the only way to kill an easement is if the same person holds both the dominant and the servient tenement. That's how you kill an easement. You can do it other ways, but that's the primary, easiest way to do it. Okay? Questions? Okay. All right, let's do the first case then. All right, the first case is Miller versus Lutheran Conference and Camp Association, Pennsylvania, 1938. Catherine, I'll call on you in just a second. One point at the outset, I know this is obvious for people in Texas, it might not be. Water freezes in the winter. I know this sounds so obvious, but the reason why it was the ice and spring, all this stuff, in the summer, it was used for like recreational activities, and the winter, it was used for ice, right? Before modern refrigeration existed, the way to get ice was to take it from a frozen place, right? So you would take it from a lake, and the Poconos is actually a beautiful area of Pennsylvania, and maybe you bring it to Philadelphia or New York. You'd actually chop up blocks of ice, put them in ice trucks, and transport them to the city. That's how you would get ice. And when people say, "Oh, Josh, isn't that gross? People were swimming where the ice." Okay, deal with it, right? This is what they had. I say that because every year someone's like, "Wait, you make ice where people were swimming? That's gross." Okay. Get. Well, ice cubes come from big blocks of ice, right? So if you had a huge ice box, right? And they would take these huge blocks of ice and deliver them to different places.
You could chip some off or just leave them there.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea of an ice box is basically a self-contained unit. You put a huge block of ice and stay cold for it, and you get a delivery every couple days. Yeah, we live in modern luxuries, right? All right. Let's see. Okay, Catherine, that's who you are. All right, Catherine, you want to give me the facts, please, in this case? Rufus, yeah.
They created this corporation,
Uh-huh.
and they own this land within it, and they lease it.
Yep, yeah, the facts are confusing. We'll spend a few minutes on the facts, but just go as far as you can.
They leased it, I think, to
No, it wasn't to the city.
Lutheran.
Well, the Lutherans come much, much later. We're at the beginning here. So Frank and Rufus had some land. Who they lease it to?
Oh, the spring water.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, spring water ice company.
Okay, so let me just pause right there for a minute. Frank and Rufus own this land, right? And they lease it for 99 years to the Pocono Spring Water Ice Company. Again, why 99 years? This was a thing that people did back then. No one expected to actually live that long. But it was the idea that at some point there would be a reversion back to the grantor. I don't know why they would do that, but that's what they did. And they can do that. Okay, so they gave 99-year lease, which I guess would have wound down in 1984, if my math is right, give or take. I don't even know what happened to that lease, but in theory, 99 years would run eventually. I'm sorry? Is my math right? 1994. 94, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying it didn't matter because we have refrigerators.
We do have refrigerators, but yes, that's true. We do have those. Okay. All right, Liz, what happens next? So they give this 99-year lease. What happens next?
Then they granted to Rufus and his heirs a fourth of the interest for boating, fishing, and whatnot.
Okay, well, there's a couple transactions. So first, they put a mortgage on the property. The company puts a mortgage on the property in 1898. Then in 1899, Liz, the company grants rights to Frank. What rights did they grant to Frank? We'll get to Rufus in a minute.
Exclusive rights to fish and boat in all the waters of the said corporation.
Okay, good. So again, the corporation gave Frank the exclusive right to fish and boat in the lake. Now, this might be weird. It's like, wait a minute, isn't he the landlord, right? Doesn't he own the land for this 99-year lease business? During that 99-year lease, he has basically nothing to do with the land. It belongs to this corporation. So basically, the corporation is giving him back rights, which he would have otherwise had. Now you may ask, Josh, why would he do this stupid thing? Why wouldn't he just keep the land himself, right? Corporations are useful, right? You learned this in law school. Because if a person goes into default, right, goes into debt, the debtors can go after his private assets. But when you put property in the ownership of a corporation, and the corporation goes bust, they can't touch your private assets. So if I had to guess, Frank did this as some sort of a mechanism to shield himself from debt, right? There was uncertainty, so let the corporation take the mortgage, let the corporation take care of everything for 100 years, he'll be long dead, right? Okay. So in 1899, the company gave Frank and his assigns the exclusive right to fish and boat in the lake. And what does that mean? You can go fishing in the lake and you can go boating in the lake. Liz, what did that not include? Bathing. What's bathing? Swimming. I ask every year, at least people don't know what that is, right? Bathing means swimming. Duh, right? Yeah, of course. Does anyone yeah, it was like, well, bathing? You taking a bath in there, right? I know. I teach this case every year. It's like, that's gross. Taking a bath or getting the water, right? That's why people always with the ice.
People probably bathed in worse places.
Oh, they did, right? And this, again, bathing, like a bathing suit. You ever wonder why it's called a bathing suit?
Because you just bathe.
You just never thought about it, right? Okay, that's fine. A bathing suit, right? A bathing suit is, we go bathing. Okay. Okay. But this actually matters, right? Frank at this time had no interest in the land for at least 99 years. The only way that he could allow any activity to go on there is by having rights granted by the corporation. So the corporation grants rights over fishing and boating. Now, just to put this in perspective, when you have boats in a lake and people are fishing, you could imagine that maybe swimming is not the best idea, right? In other words, if people are throwing lines into a lake, yeah, it's dangerous. And people are, row your boat, right? That's dangerous, right? People can get knocked unconscious. They have, hook put in their mouth, something like Mary, right? It's dangerous. Things can happen. So you can understand why they would not convey the bathing rights to Frank. Swimming, fine.
No, it's funny.
Fine, whatever. Bathing rights, swimming rights, okay? But then, Randall, Frank did something that caused some issues. What did Frank do the following year, 1900? What did he give to Rufus, to be precise? A quarter interest in what? Ah, okay. So in 1900, Frank conveys to Rufus and his assigns a 1/4 interest in fishing and boating, which he could do, right? He has the right to do it. He can convey it. And also a 1/4 interest in bathing rights. Now, Frank has no interest in bathing, so he basically conveyed something he did not himself have. Okay? Everyone with me? Okay. And then they operate this business for 25 years, where again, apparently, I guess people were swimming and boating and fishing in the same lake, and there was no problem. Okay, but now, Randall, what happens over that 25 years? What's going on through that entire process?
More and more profit, but then Rufus finally dies.
Well, no, we'll get to the Rufus, but legally, what's going on during that 25 years? Yes,
Well,
everyone.
they're basically kind of restricted. I mean, they're using
That's
it
right.
without
Prescription, right? Just reminds, what's prescription?
basically using it kind of like adverse possession.
Okay,
Right.
but let's walk through this, right? We know that the company gave them the rights over bathing and boating, but Mike, was permission given for swimming?
No.
Okay, so was this hostile?
Oh, I guess, yeah.
Probably, right? Now again, this is all owned by the same family, so it's kind of weird, right? You probably like, couldn't they just ask for permission? They didn't know about it. But in the classic sense, they were squatting, right? They were adversely using the land. The land did not give them permission to swim, and they were running this business for 25 years. And maybe it wasn't year round, it's way too cold to swim in the winter, but at least during the season when swimming was permissible, that's what they were doing. Okay, so Mike, did they obtain a prescriptive easement? Did Rufus and Mike, no, I'm sorry, it's Mike, right?
I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Well said, yeah. So did Frank, I'm sorry. This is why the names tag screw me up, right? Did Frank and Rufus acquire prescriptive easement over those 25 years?
I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean,
You're fighting it. Okay, so you say yes. I think that's right. We'll get back to it in a minute, right? Now, Brian, if Rufus and Frank acquired a prescriptive easement, did that right belong to them or did it belong to the corporation?
The prescriptive easement belonged to them.
And if the bank would ever go into foreclosure, for whatever reason, right, the bank forecloses on the property, would the bank then dissolve that easement?
Yes.
No.
No.
So this is one of these things, right? If you let someone adversely possess your land, they gain a prescriptive easement. That doesn't go away in the event of a foreclosure. Why? Lacey, why does it not go away?
Because that right is still inherent to them.
Yes. It wasn't the banks to take. It wasn't the banks to take, right? If the property owner, right? If the property owner, let's just say in the first 10 years of paying the mortgage, everything's fine, right? If the property owner is able to adversely possess one of the sticks in the bundle, right? The bank then takes Blackacre subject to that easement. This is one of these weird things where actually squatting can diminish the bank's interest. Right? Okay, so that's what could happen. Let's just go back to the facts here, okay? So it says for 25 years they run this business and they get their easement. Okay, but let's go back to 1902. The mortgagee, the bank, releases claims on fishing and boating rights to Frank, but they do not release the claims for swimming. And then in 1903, okay, the bank forecloses on the 99-year term. Okay? And they sold it to this Pocono Pines company. So here, I think I might call everyone, Davis. So here, let's just say it was a 10-year period. Who exactly was Frank and Rufus squatting on for 10 years? Was it on the Pocono Springs Company or Pocono Pines Company?
Pocono Pines.
That's right. So actually, they weren't squatting on the first company. They were squatting on the second company that got in the foreclosure sale. Okay? And they were there for 20-something years. Yeah. In 1925, Rufus dies. And then things start getting messy. Okay? The title then vests in Catherine Miller, who is Frank's wife. And it seems she doesn't get along too well with the other side of the family, right? Maybe because Rufus was only getting a quarter cut all those years. Okay? At that point, Rufus is executor. Okay? Gives a 1-year license to the Lutherans to fish, boat, and bathe. Okay? So the question in this case is actually fairly straightforward. Was Rufus able to convey the 1-year license to bathe? Okay, so to first outset, Jessica, what exactly was Rufus's executor conveying? How would we characterize that the easement? Was it an easement in gross or an easement appertenant?
Easement and gross.
Okay. And a common law, could one convey an easement in gross?
You said earlier no.
Yeah, the answer is no, right? But that's not how the court resolves this case, right? I think that common law rule's there, and it's not clear if Pennsylvania followed it. But the court here takes a different kind of analysis, right? Okay. So Chris, why could Rufus's estate not convey this easement over bathing?
Because the court said was it a profit in gross that they had to, both sides had to agree in order to allow Rufus's family to give the easement to the Lutheran.
Okay, very good. The court relies on what's called the one stock rule. The one stock rule. What's the one stock rule? It's this common law doctrine that says any easement that's acquired by prescription cannot be divided, right? When you get an easement by prescription, you have to exercise it together. Both parties would have to agree to assign it. You know, the example I always use is like on a submarine, right? To fire the missile, you both have to turn the key, right? You both have to sign off on it. If they both agree, they can convey it. So it seems in Pennsylvania, at least, you could convey the easement in gross. That's actually not what the court's upset about, right? But at least in Pennsylvania, they acquired the right to bathe together. Oh, that sounds really bad. They acquired the right to allow swimming together. Therefore, they would have to sell it together. As a result, the easement to the Lutherans was not valid. Okay? In other words, Frank can veto Rufus's executor in selling to the Lutherans. Okay. So questions on the one stock rule in the Lutheran case? Yes?
Does that apply only to prescriptive easements, or is that easements in gross?
If you jointly acquire an easement in gross, I think it would be the same rule as well. Right? You, in a jurisdiction where you can jointly acquire an easement, you can not sell unless both parties consent, right? Think of it like a joint tenancy in common type deal, or maybe a tenancy by the entirety, if you remember that from Property 1. Both the husband and wife have to sell it together. I think this operates in a similar fashion. Now, this is a common law rule, which, of course, has been abandoned in the modern approach. Courts have abandoned the one stock rule. If you look at the restatement third of property, which, again, no one actually uses, but it's been published. I know people are writing the fourth restatement of property. I'm like, why? But they're writing it. Easements in gross can be divided generally under the modern approach. Okay? Yes, Mike?
Is the one stock rule aligned well with Josh Black's law?
In the common law depth of my mind, absolutely. I think it was on my exam last semester, actually. Yeah, Melanie and Catherine?
Could a bank foreclosing on a property with an easement, if they're aware, go ahead and try to buy that easement?
Sure.
And then
Yeah, the bank can try and buy out the easement holder, right? But if a bank takes a piece of property on which there's an easement, foreclosure does not kill the easement.
But if whether they know or don't know,
Well, the tricky part was prescription, right? Remember the first day of class, Mr. Robinson, right? He was sitting in a foreclosed house in Dallas somewhere trying to squat the house. Had he managed to do that for a decade and Bank of America took no action, then they would have actually lost title to the house, right? But that's obvious if there's a guy sitting in your living room. The harder one is prescription, because what if someone's just walking across the path every day, right? And they're gaining a right to use it. Or if, let's say you have a lake in your backyard and someone goes for a swim every morning, which I guess would be hard in the winter, but you get my drift, right? It's harder to catch a prescription than to catch a full-time easement. But you still have to have notoriety.
Is that kind of a risk for mortgagees to, like, they have an investment out there in a property
Yeah,
and
yeah,
people are just
yeah. I mean, the requirements for prescription to be open and notorious, right? But if a person's walking across it in public and the bank never bothers showing up, that sucks for the bank. It's not the squatter's fault the bank doesn't take care of their properties. Which is why in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, a lot of the places had these foreclosure messes, and you had squatters who just were going undetected. Now, our friend Mr. Robinson won the news. That was his mistake. He shouldn't have gone on the news. Catherine?
So my question is along those lines, where earlier we said the prescriptive easement doesn't resolve if there's a property transaction.
Mhm.
Is that applicable for all easements or just the prescriptive easement?
Say it one more time. I think I lost you in the middle.
Okay, so that dissolution,
Are you talking about merger? No. What dissolution are you talking about?
so if you have a property transaction, you don't dissolve the easement,
If the same person owns both the dominant and the servient tenement,
that's the only,
that's what's called merger.
okay.
Right, but are you asking something else?
Yes. No, anything.
only prescriptive easements dissolve in a foreclosure.
No, that's not what I said.
No, I have a prescriptive easement does not dissolve if there's a property transaction.
No, that's right. If I have a prescriptive easement across Blackacre, and you sell Blackacre to someone else, my easement remains in full force, right?
But your easement remains in full force regardless of if it's prescriptive.
Yeah,
or
it doesn't
not,
matter. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's what I was getting
yes.
at.
When you sell Blackacre, that does not get rid of the easement across Blackacre. The easement remains.
Okay, so it's any easement does not dissolve in a property transaction.
Easements are
unless-
forever, like diamonds.
Mhm.
Yeah,
By both pieces of property.
that's right.
The same person owns both.
Easements last forever. They go on and on and on. Mike?
All that, so prescription, is that the same as an easement in gross then?
A prescriptive easement is an easement in gross. That's right. Generally, I don't think you can inherit a prescriptive easement, right? That belongs to the person who squatted, right? You can't sell a prescriptive easement.
So like, when that person dies, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, yeah. So easements are forever, but prescriptive easements will last the life of the person. I guess that's correct. Okay. They're not like diamonds in that regard. You want to see this? Yes, Brian.
You said in the past that the prescriptive easement is in a person that has to do the same event.
It's gross, yeah.
Every day for a certain amount of time.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying in this case that Frank and Rufus swam every day for that amount of time?
Well, to be precise, the easement they acquired was allowing others to swim in the lake, right? It's kind of a weird one because they're not the ones swimming in the water, but they were running a business in which others could swim in the water.
That's what confused the heck out of me.
And that's not a conventional type of prescriptive easement that you can acquire, but it is. I mean, let's say you allow people to ski on your slopes for an entire decade every winter, right? You're not the one skiing, but the business you're running allows others, and that's the activity that you've now gained the right to let others do going forward. Okay, I like your T-shirt. Okay. Yes, Blessing.
You were able to establish the easement because it was a private lake, right? Like this wouldn't,
Well, the lake belonged to the Pocono Pine Company, right? Lakes. Oh, I see what you're saying. Lakes are private; they're not the ocean, right? Oceans. Everyone, okay? Yeah. Oceans belong to the public. You cannot adversely possess an ocean. But lakes are entirely enclosed in a piece of land, and you can adversely possess a lake.
I was thinking about like Michigan.
The Great Lakes? The Great Lakes are pretty big. I don't think they belong to any one person. And I think also they're quite huge. They're great. Yes, Randall. There are really complicated rules about navigable waters. I don't want to go there. But the Great Lakes are actually connected to the oceans by various tributaries, so it's a different story. But no, you can't squat Lake Michigan. That's not going to happen. Good luck with that. What was that?
I said Blessed ruined his retirement plan. He thinks it's
Yeah, good luck. It gets really cold in the winter. Anything else on that one? Okay. Let's do the next case. Brown versus Voss, Washington, 1986. And this is actually the second case we've had this semester on the Hood Canal. The first one, if you remember, was Howard versus Kunto, which involved the adverse possession case where everyone's lot was like 50 feet over where it should have been. So this is a very jagged piece of property where apparently things get screwed up very quickly. I don't know. Colleen, I think you're next. Okay, you want to give me the facts in Brown versus Voss?
Sure. So, 1952, predecessors in title of parcel A
Mm-hmm.
granted to the predecessor of parcel B an easement across it to come in and go out, basically from parcel B.
Hmm?
And then the defendants acquired parcel A, 1973.
Uh-huh.
The plaintiffs bought parcel B on April 1st, 1977, and then C, but from two different owners.
Mm-hmm.
And the owners of parcel C didn't have permission, or they weren't granted the easement or the ability to cross the easement. When the plaintiffs acquired the parcel on B, there was a house on it, and they wanted to remove it and replace it with a home that was along the lines of parcel B and C. And they started clearing the parcels, and they spent $11,000 and formed a fence.
Yep, that's what you're never supposed to do. Right, never build a fence because you're going to lose.
And
Go ahead.
then the plaintiffs sued for removal and injunction against the defendants.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. So let me just go over the timeline again. I think Colleen hit all the high points. We have here, this is the diagram. It's a little hard to see because it's black and white. We have Lot A, Lot B, and Lot C. And the road is over here. Okay. In 1952, many years earlier, the predecessor of A gave the predecessor of B a private road easement. What that means is B could cross onto A to get to the main road. And we know because there was an easement given, there's permission, there's no prescription going on. Okay? Then 20 years later, D, the defendant, acquires Lot A. Okay? And the plaintiff buys Lot B. But the plaintiff wants to get a little creative. He wanted to build a bigger house. And the new house would straddle the line between B and C. Okay? So he acquired C. Now, we don't know how the owner of Lot C made it to the main road. We have no knowledge. It's perhaps they trespassed, maybe just no one cared, maybe that helicopter, we don't really know. How'd they get out? We have no idea. Okay. So now we have a situation where B and C are basically landlocked. Okay? But there's an easement from the owner of B to the easement, there's an easement from the owner of B over the owner of A. Okay? So Corbett, was this an easement in gross or an easement appertenant?
It was an appertenant
Okay, why?
because they had permission to do so.
What makes it appertenant?
That it goes with the land.
Right. Which was dominant and which was a servient tenement?
The dominant was parcel B.
Good.
The servient was parcel A.
Okay, very good. The dominant estate was parcel B. So the question here is whether the court can extend the benefit to B for the benefit to C. Right? can the court extend the benefit for B to C? Now, in this case, the plaintiff asks, hey, would you mind letting me, cross over from my new house on B to C, that straddles B to C? And the defendant flipped out and placed logs and concrete and a chain fence along the road. Now, I think I told you this once before. This is what's called a spite fence, right? You build out of spite. And for whatever reason, whenever any party builds a spite fence, they lose. I can't tell you why, but in every case in that damn book where the party built a spite fence, they lose. So I guess the lesson from this case is don't build a spite fence. But people do it because they're angry. It's like, you know what? It's like, screw this. I'm building a fence. This guy's not crossing on my land. And it becomes very personal. Now, Holly, let me ask you a question. Would it have mattered at all to the owner of A that this new house was being built? Would it in any way affected his life to allow this person in the bigger house to cross?
No. Like he didn't have damages.
Why do you think he got so angry and so upset that? Oh, you think jealousy? I've never had that one before. Why do you think jealousy? You think so?
I have no idea.
I know. In all these years, no one said jealousy. That's a good one. Maybe. Whenever you hear a new answer, I'm like, oh, that's good. Maybe jealousy. But Holly, let me ask you the question again. What might A have been worried about if he gave permission to the owner of A crossing his land? What might else have happened here? What might have happened if A gave the owner of C permission to cross?
Oh, well, then if C, maybe he's worried if C, then they later broke up B and C and then he gave it to everybody.
Well, this is a pretty big lot here, isn't it? What if they built a house over here, and they built a house over here, and they built a house over here? So rather than having a single resident crossing A, maybe might have multiple residents crossing A. You see, once you get permission, once you get an easement to the owner of C, there might be multiple houses on C. And all of those houses would now be able to cross. So look, we can mock the plaintiff and say the owner of A is being a jerk, but I don't think he was. I think his actual objection was quite reasonable, right? I think his objection was entirely reasonable. The second he gives an easement to the owner of C, it's not just this little skinny lot over here. It's this huge triangle-shaped lot over there that can now have new people coming across. Okay? So the courts have to ask, are we going to issue an injunction? An injunction would allow the owner of C to cross onto B. Again, it's not limited to the single house. It could also extend to multiple houses. So Mike?
Is that a road back to the west?
Here?
No, back up on the other side, on the totally other side of the land.
This?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think it's all woods.
So, well, my question was like, could you make a road someplace? No.
Every now and then someone asks me, can't you just drill a hole through the woods over here? Usually you have to have like a little bit of like leeway to get into a main road, so I don't think it was possible, but maybe.
There was a road.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd have to basically drill a hole over here.
My thing was is that, you said normally courts, there's a way to do it. You gotta do it. But a spike fence kind of cancels all that, or what?
I think so.
Okay. that's
Yeah,
fine.
Catherine.
So, if the person bought parcel C, also owned parcel B, and they developed it for, I don't know, 3 or 4 houses,
Uh-huh.
would the court have still reached that same extension?
I don't think so. But I think that's what that A was worried about. And by the way, if you own B and C, you can't just say, aha, I have a single lot. That's not how it works. Even if you own 2 plots of land and your house straddles them, they're considered 2 plots of land. It's black acre and white acre. By the way, I've done this exam question in the past. It confuses people. You can own black acre and white acre and have a house straddle them, and the rules for each are different, right? There might be an easement for half the house and not for the other half. So you have to be very careful if a single house straddles 2 properties. Just be attuned to that. All right. So Malin, what does the court do here? Walk me through the court's analysis, please.
The court decided for the owner of plot B and C.
Uh-huh.
Mainly, I think it's fairness.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because they reasoned that there was not much harm caused to the owner of lot A.
Okay.
And lot A waited about a year or so to pretty much sue the owner of BNC.
Uh-huh.
And the owner of BNC has been carrying about $11,000 of costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the court decided that he could pass. He could continue.
Now, did the court actually extend the easement?
No, it was
No.
just that.
No, you're right. There's no easement extended. So if the owner of B sells his land to someone else, does that benefit then extend to the third party? I don't think so. See, what B actually wanted was for the court to basically order an easement to be given. They would probably pay market price, whatever the price is for it, right? And an easement, once you have it, can be assigned to successors. The court's ruling, as I read it, and maybe you disagree, is like, well, we don't think this is fair, so we're going to allow the owner of B to cross from B to C, but that's all we're saying. And then they say, look, the trial court did not abuse its discretion. Its analysis was completely wrong, but they didn't abuse their discretion as a matter of equity. So do what's equitable, do what's fair. And this is the sort of weird decision that courts do. It's like, well, the law isn't really on their side, but equity is. Mike.
Not you, but I mean, we learned that like when a sea is landlocked as it is, doesn't it make it basically unsellable? And if that guy dies, does that die with him?
Okay, so two things. So first, the specific issue here is whether you would extend the easement from A to B to A to C. That's separate from going to court and seeking an easement by necessity. Everyone see Mike's question, right? Mike's saying, wasn't C landlocked? Had the claim been, I have an easement by necessity, they could have possibly given it. But that's not what B sought. All B sought was to extend his easement to C. So that's a different legal claim. Right? In other words, Mike, you can't litigate a case to the state Supreme Court and then change your theory midstream. You have to state your legal theory at the outset and you're stuck with it. Yes, Corbett.
So you have the two parcels.
Mhm.
You said that they always remain separate, but can't you get a new survey and combine them?
No, that's an important point. You can survey as many times as you want, right? But you're still having black acre and white acre, lot B and lot C. You cannot change those, right? You can subdivide perhaps, right, your lot into different sublots, but whatever easements were existing beforehand are now applicable to each of the subsequent lots. Right? In other words, you can't get rid of an easement by chopping up your property. You can call it different things, but the easements remain.
Okay. So,
Please.
so do you think if he would have just kept, made a new house?
Well, if he would have kept his house on B, there's no problem. If he just kept his house on B, there's no issue because he was benefiting from his easement. You can't stop it. Because the easement said the owner of B can cross onto the owner of A. Right, but let me just make this point a second, Colleen, right? You often hear the phrase subdivision, right? That's usually where a person owns a huge piece of land and they chop it up. One of the reasons why subdivisions are effective is the person owns it in fee simple. They own the entire land in its entirety without any sort of interests. And they can chop it up and put whatever easements they want. But if you start with a plot of land that has easements on it and you chop it up, all you're doing is making many people subject to those easements. You cannot get rid of it unless you get a release or a merger. You have to get to buy out the person who has the easement. These easements are very tricky. They sit around forever. You can't get rid of it. Colleen.
So at what point, so there's a lot of trees or forests, at what point, when they start building up that area and more houses are built, when does the road structure, or when is it forced in? Can't the state step in and say?
The state can. So the state can use what's called eminent domain, right? Eminent domain is a power of the state to take private property for public use. And if the state says we want to take some land over here to build an on-ramp for the road, they can do that, and they'll pay compensation. And indeed, often when a party wants to seek an easement by necessity, perhaps the remedy is instead of an easement by necessity, the state just uses eminent domain, right? In other words, before going to court to seek a necessity claim, you ask the state, can you please use adverse possession to build a road? You can petition the state to build a road. That's often easier than going to court. Yes, Lisa.
So I'm trying to make sure my understanding of the Supreme Court's holding was right.
So they were basically saying that
couldn't really look at anything else. And what's left there is just, did the trial court abuse its discretion or not, which is a different metric from whether or not an injunction should be applied. It's
Yeah.
the discretion on how they came to.
I think
their
that's,
decision.
yeah, I think that's mostly right.
Okay.
Indeed, hold on. Caitlin, you want to talk to me the dissent, please? What did the dissent's not very happy here. What's the dissent saying?
The Eminent use of the easement is a trespass. And, moving around to use the easement to get to the PC, was not, continued the original easement. It used, authorizing the continued trespass.
Well, okay, so let me try this again. Does the dissent think that the easement should be extended? Justice Dorr.
I don't think so.
Okay, then where does he disagree with the majority? And what point does he disagree with the majority?
I think it was just kind of a semantic.
No, no, Mac. What's the disagreement?
On the point of equity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he says the Browns are responsible for the hardship of creating the landlocked parcel.
Very good. Okay. He says, look, you can't extend the easement. There's going to be an ongoing trespass. Okay? You cannot extend the easement. So he agrees with the majority. But the majority issues a sort of equitable ruling to grant the injunction. He says, why are we doing this? This is not for us to issue. But this was a dissent. So often judges will agree on the law, but disagree on the equity. Mike?
When I read this, I read it wrong, or my opinion changed.
Okay, tell me.
Well, before I was like, oh, well, the guy put up spikes and he's being a jerk.
Yeah, he changed that one. Yeah, he's doing something else. I heard you.
Yeah, but he was being a jerk about it.
Yeah.
But after talking about it and going through it, I mean, the guy was kind of an idiot for building this, home.
Look, I have sympathy for the owner of Lot A. I do. I really do. I mean, again, when you build a fence, the courts don't like you, but I think his objection was reasonable. He didn't want to sell the easement. He was not obligated to. Look, if A was a lawyer, you say, you know what? You want to go to court? Go get an easement by necessity. Go for that. And maybe the court gives it, maybe they don't. Or he says, you know what? Go to the state and ask for eminent domain. But he didn't do that. He just wanted to extend the easement, which you can't do. So I have sympathy for the owner of Lot A. I do. Angie, in the mail-in. He could have gone to court and sought an injunction to prevent trespass. But I mean, who has enough money to go to court, right? Isn't it easier just put some concrete and some logs and put some crap on the road? It's a lot easier. Mila, was your hand up?
So, can you say that we specifically is concerned for tenant and girls at the same time?
I think, I see what you're saying. So for Lot B, it's appertenant, but for Lot C, it's gross?
Yeah.
That's a very good comment. Very good. Let me just explain what you just said. At this moment, the owner of Lot B basically has two separate easements, right? He has the written easement, which allows B to A, but also the court's injunction, which functions as the easement in gross from C to A. Yeah, I think that's right. And again, the easement in gross dies with the owner of Lot C. That doesn't extend beyond. But I think, yeah, they built the road eventually, so this is kind of a stupid point, but we saw this litigation. Okay. All right. There's a few notes at the end of the chapter. How do you? Oh, sorry, Celeste.
Oh, sorry.
No, apologize.
Frimberger, the Anzalati, they talked about how you should go to the courts first.
Yes.
And, I'm sorry, no, not to go to the courts first, but to jump through other hoops first.
Oh, you're talking about is that the environmental case from Connecticut, right? Where they filled the wetlands, right?
How that works here, because in the, I believe the postscript afterwards, it says that the owner of Lot B and C, never talked to A and offered them money to make easement from C to A.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have more sympathy for A, because they didn't really try to negotiate. Maybe if they tried to negotiate, they could have done it. But the Frimberger case is a little bit different. That means you have to go through state administrative processes to before you can claim land was unmarketable. but similar. Okay. All right. There are several ways to terminate an easement. Okay, there's several ways to terminate an easement. One way you can do it is what's called a release. Right? Where basically the owner says, you know what, I will release you from this requirement. Sometimes easements have time periods that says I can use this land for X years. And after the time period ends, let them go. If you have an easement by necessity, sometimes the easement by necessity ends when the necessity goes away. You know, maybe some flooding ends, maybe a road is built, you just don't need it anymore. Merger, that's the example I gave with the poll question. When the same person owns both the dominant and the servient tenement, the easement goes away. Estoppel. This is your favorite reliance interest, where if you rely on some oral statement, that the easement goes away, and you don't have it in writing, the court's going to say the easement goes away. Eminent domain. It's also called condemnation. If the state uses eminent domain to seize your land, that clears off any easement on it. Prescription. This one's actually funny. Right? Let's say that I have an easement to cross some land. Someone can actually squat on my easement. And if someone squats on me for 10 years, I lose my easement. Let's say it again. Let's say that I have an easement to cross Blackacre in a certain spot. And let's say someone does that for 10 years, I'm aware of it, I actually lose my easement because they prescripted my easement. You can do that. Yeah.
Does it have to be a certain kind of easement or just any easement?
Generally, that's an easement in gross that you can universally possess. There's also abandonment. Right? Abandonment. Where if I no longer use an easement, it goes away. Okay. Questions on that? All right. They used to have a section in your book that they took out, but I still like to do it. And I think it's actually useful. So I'm going to show you a little. Oops, no, that's not what I want to do. This is actually what I'm doing tomorrow, but it's the same idea. All right. What happens if you have an easement that says this easement is being used for railroads, right? And this was an easement written in the 1800s. And railroads aren't really used anymore. And the government decides to convert it to, let's say, a park for a trail. Can you use an easement designed for railroads, hiking, or biking, or running? And one of the problems becomes, how far can you deviate from the text of an easement and still be within the scope of the easement? So this actually happened a lot. There were easements across the country for railroads, right? And in the 1980s and 90s, they said, we have an idea. Let's convert these railroads into public trails. It's called rails to trails, right? You make public parks out of these railroad easements. It's a great idea. And people object, saying, no, the easement's only for railroads. And if you're not using it for railroad, you've abandoned it. Now, some of these railroad easements said, used for transportation. Well, maybe a car is transportation, a bicycle is transportation, right? How far can you deviate? So I want to give you this little thought experiment just to think about. There's a classic law school riddle. Okay? You've probably seen it before. Where you go to a park, and there's a sign at the park that says no vehicles in the park. Now, this is an actual sign that I found. It was in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And I risked my life to take this picture. Why? Dude right there on the bike. About a second after I took this picture, he was over here. This is a steep hill. You can kind of tell from the grade. So you're welcome. So things like, whoop, it's about to hit me. But the sign says no vehicles are allowed in the park. Right? So what's a vehicle? What, an ambulance? Ooh. What, a baby stroller? Roller skates. Segways. Horse. Tricycle. Unicycle. Wheelchair. Right? What definition do you give to a vehicle? So you might say, I don't know, maybe you'll say a mode of transportation. Mhm. So that exclude baby carriages.
Well, they're getting moved around.
They are getting moved around in them. They're very effective. Maybe you might say something that runs on tires or as a motor, some form of propulsion. Would that include a remote control car? What if you say something that rides on 4 wheels? Would that include a unicycle? Would include an airplane? Would include a toy car. My favorite example that gives people the most difficulty is an ambulance. Would you actually block an ambulance from entering a park? Now, what if I told you that this sign was put up there 100 years ago when no cars existed? That means horses are prohibited, but you can have cars because that wasn't understood by the drafters. Right? You don't have to give me answers. You can think about it if you want. But these are issues that come up with easements that are old, right? How can you extend the text of a very old easement to some sort of modern situation? Angie. Yes. Yeah, it's, what's it called? It's the island. Mackinac Island, right? Cars are actually prohibited, that's right. No cars are allowed on the entire island, that's right. Yeah, it's summertime, yeah. Because I think the vice president visited there and he brought his motorcade and people were not happy. I know. Next. That's our hand back there.
I was just saying, would you extend it by saying something like no authorized or unauthorized vehicles?
That's not what the sign says, my friend, right? When you modify the meaning of a text, of course it changes what it extends to. If you ever taken law school class on legislation or statutory interpretation, this is one of the classic riddles a law students get. Like, what's a vehicle, right? How do you define it? Is it motorized, 2 wheels, 4 wheels, mode of conveyance? What about baby carriage? What about ambulance? What about a horse, right? Maybe you want something that's slow. Maybe a scooter is okay, but not a Segway scooter, which is very quiet. It's not making any noise, right? It's something that makes a lot of sound, right? What is a vehicle? There's no good question, no good answer to this one. All right, any questions on that? That's all I have. I will see you next class.